Yesterday, something shifted. After almost 2 years of war, Netanyahu has essentially announced that Israel is done playing by Hamas's rules. We are moving towards a full military takeover of Gaza, not because we've stopped caring about the hostages, but because Hamas has shown us what they've told us really from the beginning, that they aren't interested in a real deal. The latest hostage video of Evyatar David made that brutally clear. It showed a man who's not just starving to death. He was being forced to dig his own grave, not just being held captive, but literally being forced to die in Hamas's tunnels. And that video, ironically, might be Hamas's biggest mistake. They thought it would pressure Israel to concede, but instead it pushed Israel towards finishing the war on our own terms. Because Hamas's real weapon isn't rockets, it's psychological warfare, and it backfired this time. Hamas knows it can't win a war militarily. It can't defeat the IDF in a straight fight. So instead, it wages a war of narratives and emotions, and it's running two parallel propaganda campaigns: aid and starvation narratives aimed at the world, designed to generate international outrage and pressure on Israel to stop the war. But the other thing is hostage videos and psychological torture, aimed not at the world but at Israelis, designed to exploit our internal divisions, create panic, and force the government to cave into a deal that will be nothing but bad for us. They release content whenever it's strategically useful. When the world starts to question Hamas's stories about starvation, they push new humanitarian crisis images, often staged or stripped of context. In fact, the more children are killed or the more children are starving, the better for Hamas. When internal Israeli protests, however, build up against the government, they release new hostage videos to fan the flames. This is not random, it is a deliberate playbook. The aimed propaganda is an emotional trap designed through a very clear narrative. From day one, Hamas has weaponized the humanitarian crisis, and I say crisis carefully, because it is they that hoard the food and fuel in their tunnels. They then go ahead filming civilians going hungry above ground, despite the facts on the ground that show that there's way more than enough food for all of Gaza. They attack aid convoys themselves, sometimes firing at trucks, at the people distributing the food and the people going to collect the food, to create footage of chaos that they can blame on Israel. They know that the West, especially progressive audiences, respond emotionally to these images and not intellectually. The result? Global leaders like Macron, Spain, Ireland, even the UK and Australia start demanding ceasefires and recognition of a Palestinian state, even when every intelligence report says Hamas is still fully armed and hiding, and they are the ones responsible for everything going bad in Gaza. Here's the truth. If Israel stopped fighting tomorrow, Hamas wouldn't stop starving its own people because it works for their propaganda machine. Unfortunately, the people who actually care about the Gazans are the ones propagating the tragedy against them. The world doesn't want to face this because it's easier to blame the side with tanks and jets than the side with propaganda videos. It's scary to understand that this is radical Islam at its worst, and it's coming for everybody. And it is so much easier to believe that Israel are the terrible ones. So let's just blame them. And then this whole thing can just go away and the children will be okay. But children under Hamas, Palestinian children, will never be okay. Neither will Israeli children. Which brings us to the next: hostage propaganda that is dividing Israelis every single day. It's hostage videos that aren't just meant to break Israeli morale, they're meant to turn Israelis against each other. Families of the hostages seeing this footage, which makes all of us sick, demand immediate deals, any deal, to save their loved ones. I don't blame them. I'd feel the same way. Others say, if we give in, though, Hamas wins. And this is such a hard balance to play, the balance of emotion versus intellect. The government is caught in the middle, torn between public pressure and actual strategy, oftentimes militarily. How do you go in and eliminate an enemy that hides with our hostages that we need to get? Every time, however, an Israeli leader hints at progress in Gaza, Hamas releases a new video to stall momentum. It is psychological warfare designed to make us fight amongst ourselves instead of uniting to defeat them, because they know what I wish we would know, that if we are united, they can't beat us. But if we are divided, they have a chance. The video of Evyatar David and of Ron, released just days ago, was another move in that game. But this time, thankfully, it backfired. It forced the government to confront the brutal reality. Hamas is not negotiating in good faith. They are only waiting to let more hostages die. They are using them as pawns as we keep on going so that they can keep on rebuilding themselves militarily and strategically, and until the Israeli people get so tired that we just cave to their demands. But this time, we are finally, it is my hope, seeing past it. But before we get to what's going to happen now, let's talk about how they came up with this brilliant propaganda machine that honestly almost knocked the people of Israel on their butts a little bit. Qatar, Qatar, and once again, Qatar. Let's pull back the curtain on this puppet master, because Hamas couldn't run this propaganda empire alone. The real mastermind behind Hamas's image war is Qatar, and it has been going on for a very long time. Number one, Qatar funds Hamas since forever. Qatar has sent over $1.5 billion into Gaza, and if you're wondering how Gaza could look like it did with so much money, they claim it's humanitarian aid, but we know cash has been hand-delivered in suitcases funding Hamas bureaucrats, weapon stockpiles, and the tunnel networks, right? It is so clear that they have used all of this money aimed at saving the people of Palestine, but really at building out terror. Qatar houses Hamas leaders as a second strategy. Look, if you're going to house the leadership, you are going to have the leadership listen to what you say. Hamas's top officials, including Ismail Haniyeh, you remember him, live in luxury in Doha. They drink espresso and they go to five-star hotels and they live a life like you couldn't imagine. Some of them are even richer than Taylor Swift, and they're the ones signing off hostage videos that terrorize Israeli families. Third, Qatar runs Al Jazeera. Look, Al Jazeera has somehow become public and mainstream. It is not just in Arabic, but it is accessible to everyone in every language. And it's essentially a Qatar propaganda arm. It glorifies Hamas as resistance fighters. It frames every Israeli strike as genocide, even when it's targeting military sites. And it completely erases Hamas's use of human shields or the fact that Hamas started this war on October 7th. The language that they use is so sophisticated, and it has become accepted by mainstream media that Al Jazeera is just one of them. However, thankfully, Israel has started to notice this and is doing things to sanction Al Jazeera's ability to just throw out content from the country. Number four, Qatar buys Western silence through billions in investments. Qatar owns chunks of London real estate, European sports teams, and American tech companies. They've poured billions and billions and billions into US universities like Harvard and Georgetown, and don't be surprised when you realize that this is where we see everything crazy going on campuses, like encampments. They're shaping the next generation, not of just journalists and activists, but of educated intellects. The people of Harvard are not stupid, and yet they have been manipulated day after day after day in this anti-Israel and actually anti-Western narrative. This is all traced back to Qatari funding programs. And this is where it really gets genius, because number five, and probably the most important one, is Qatar weaponizes woke language. It has mastered the art of rebranding Hamas jihadi agendas into a progressive struggle. Words like decolonization, indigenous resistance, river to the sea, genocide are sold as justice movements. Rape is resistance has become something that we don't even realize the level of insanity such a statement is. When in reality, all that they mean when they're saying this is, let's erase Israel. Let's erase the Western values by using their values against them. Let's find the thing that the American people hold dear, freedom and freedom of religion, and use it against them to break apart their society, because that's what they do really well. They know that to conquer a society, you have to let the society do the work of destroying itself from within. It's what they do in the world, and it's what they're doing here in Israel. All the while spending tons of money and giving planes to presidents and acting like this amazing beautiful, rich country that just wants the best for Israel. By the way, them brokering the hostage deal is a joke because they could have put the pressure on the leadership to make it happen, and they never did. They absolutely never did. They claimed that they did, but this is working beautifully for them. The Palestinian issue is something that allows Qatar to keep on building out their dreams of Islamization whilst nobody's noticing, whilst they're signing massive financial deals with the world because they know something, that the West values freedom and that can be used against them, but they really value money. And Qatar, my friends, has a lot of money. So why did this latest video backfire when there is so much work being put in to making this happen, to making Israel fall apart from within? The Evyatar David video was meant to push Israelis to demand a ceasefire at all costs, but instead it did two main things. Number one, it actually exposed Hamas's cruelty. Even the global media couldn't spin the footage of a starving man as Israel's fault. Look, did they push it and promote it as much as they promoted the aid lies? Absolutely not. But leaders saw and took note, and they have called for Hamas to withdraw at all costs. And these countries are putting pressure on Hamas, but they are yet to learn, like they will learn with this whole idea of a Palestinian state that they're trying to recognize, that Hamas aren't interested in giving hostages back. They're not interested in peace. They're interested in one thing: the obliteration and the ending of Israel and of the Jewish people. And they don't care. They will go forever and ever and ever. They have all the time in the world to bring Israel down. And the leaders of the West need to figure this out. But sympathy for that hostage video, sympathy for Evyatar burying himself, digging his own grave, is something that we did see, at least a little bit, but not nearly as much as we should. Waiting for a deal that Hamas will never agree to, it's not a strategy. It's a death sentence for both hostages and Israeli soldiers. And that's something that a lot of people in Israel are recognizing, and specifically Netanyahu, which is something that we've wondered to ourselves why it's taken this long to get here, because it's been pretty clear to most of us, at least the people watching this video, that the strategy hasn't worked. But now that we saw that his time is actually coming to an end, you could only survive so long at that level of starvation, we've realized Hamas are actually not interested in a deal, and there is nothing left that we can do. We need to shift strategy. And what is the shift? Israel is preparing to take full military control over Gaza. The elimination of Hamas, not negotiations, is now going to be the main priority. If hostages can be freed through force, we'll do it. If Hamas suddenly caves under pressure, wonderful, but we're not depending on that anymore. And there's growing international support. Trump has openly backed Israel's right to finish the job. The question is, will Israel finally stop letting Hamas control the narrative? The question is, will Israel do the work that it needs to do, even if it means, God forbid, at the expense of the hostages? And I think this question is something that all of us have to sit upon, because something that we don't discuss enough is nuance. The fact that there is no utopian and perfect solution. In an ideal world, Hamas would be somewhat logical, and we could negotiate something with them and they'd give the hostages back. But since we know they have no intentions of ever doing that, it is time for us to make a decision between a rock and a hard place. Do we leave the hostages to potentially be murdered and just go all out and destroying Hamas, hopefully securing the future of Israel? Or do we continue to put the most emphasis on the hostages? And this question is a continuous question that Israelis have to deal with. Which life is of more value? Future Israelis, IDF soldiers, or these hostages? And the answer has never been simple, because we value every single Jewish life, unlike Hamas. And the pressure that we've been put under and the scrutiny that we've been put under, claiming that we are a country that doesn't care at all or value life, is just shocking. Every Israeli is suffering right now. Every Israeli is in trauma and is struggling to reconcile with this hard decision. But the hope and the prayer is now that whatever the decision is, that the government goes through with it properly. There are a few more steps that they need to move it forward. There needs to be approval from the cabinet, and we're hoping for that tonight. But we need a resounding win. This video confirmed, in the eyes of almost everybody who saw it, that Hamas are a terrible organization and they cannot be allowed to exist in any capacity anymore. Ideally, of course, we could bring the hostages home, but we have tried and we have tried and we have tried and we have tried, and it's just not working. They've made it out to be like there is a decision to be made here in Israel between hostages or Hamas, and it hasn't been that simple. Hamas don't give us the option of releasing the hostages. There never has been that option from their perspective because they were never interested in giving us the hostages back. And so now that we have had to just come to accept this and we realize that the clock is really, really ticking, we're going to take the more complicated route, but hopefully it will lead to some sort of freedom. You know, this week was the 20-year anniversary of Gush Katif. For those unfamiliar, Gush Katif was the location that is now Gaza, where Israelis were forcibly removed, alive and dead ones, so that we could give the Palestinians land that they deserved. And I hate using the word Palestinians because it legitimizes their right to Palestine, which they don't have. But we gave them this land in hopes of them building out a state, in hopes of them just actually deciding to focus in on themselves. But they won't, and they didn't. And this is the mistake that the Western society thinks, that they can just give the Palestinians what they want, and then peace will happen. Peace is not an ideal of Hamas. It has never been. That's why they're happy to use children to weaponize propaganda, to create more pressure on Israel. But Israel's moral clarity is strong and it is steadfast, and we know what the truth is. We know that it doesn't matter how much the world hates us. We are head focused on the fact that life is of value and that living under terror cannot be a thing ever again. You see, Hamas's strength was never its weapons. It was its ability to make the world feel something that us Israelis didn't do as well. They make us doubt ourselves, but after 2 years, the mask is finally slipping. The world is starting to see who's really pulling the strings. Qatar, a terror state dressed in a suit. And maybe, just maybe, this is the turning point where Israel will take back the narrative in the war. You see, if we've lost the narrative, there is still hope. And that hope begins with unapologetic Israeli values. Us standing up for what we believe in and us saying, you know what? Even if we can't get the hostages home, even if we can't do that, we will never allow for this terror to reign. And since the last 6 months have been so exhausting, but of us kind of standing in the middle ground, making certain claims but not pulling it through, it is now the hope of every Israeli, except for a small niche group, that's exactly what our government does. That it steps forward into this and it says, that's it. Enough is enough. A resounding win. An end to these evil, evil, evil human beings who do not deserve any, not of our land, but anything in this world. They treat our hostages this way, then they should pay the price for it. And unfortunately, it could mean that the hostages don't return home alive. But that is the case anyway. That is not going to be because of Netanyahu's decision or our government's decision. That is because of Hamas's decision to not value life, to hate us so desperately that they're willing to sacrifice everything good, including themselves, including their children, for that end. On that note, we have a very, very complicated few weeks ahead of us. If Israel does decide to go full force, if the Palestinian state is recognized, even though that's never actually going to happen because the Palestinians themselves won't allow for it. And we need so much prayers for the hostage families, prayers for the hostages themselves, and prayers for the country and the leadership to move forward into this resounding win and to be a light upon the nation, to show the world that we must eviscerate and eliminate evil at all costs, even if we're hated for it. I'm Meira, and I will see you next time.